Hi, I'm Norma McCarthy, and I'm glad you stopped by. The therapeutic relationship is unlike any other relationship you're going to have with other healthcare providers, in part because you see your therapist more often, but the other part of it is the therapeutic relationship is intimate, it's deep, and it requires somebody that you gel with, that you like, and that hopefully likes you back. And that trust that's built from that relationship is really the foundation for the work that we'll do together. So, what I found is that it's really hard, if not impossible, to get a true sense of who you're going to talk to from reading their bio or from just visiting their website. So, I created this video in hopes that my personality will shine through and you can understand where I've been through or where I've been. And kind of who I see and how I work. So I have been a licensed professional counselor for about 18 years. I started my career in mental health working in psych hospitals and residential treatment centers and community health organizations, if you will. I even did in-home therapy there for a while, to where I literally felt like I was living out of my car, because every day I was in my car and going to people's homes. And I got to say, I loved it, but I was kind of glad when that chapter in my life came to an end and I actually had an office. And so around that time, I decided to open up a private practice. And I've been doing this for about 13 years. I've been in South Lake for the past 10 years. So currently, I see clients ages 12 and up, individuals, couples, and families. So why do people pick up the phone and call a therapist? I would say the top, probably 3 or 4 reasons why people want to see me are for depression, anxiety, panic disorders, ADHD, and life transitions. So what does that look like for a teen or a tween? Well, those things tend to show up in the form of mood swings. Why are my moods up and down? They show up in interpersonal relationships. They show up in self-confidence and self-esteem, in how the person handles stress. And a lot of that stress shows up when kiddos begin middle school, when they end middle school, when they begin high school, when they get towards that junior and senior year in high school, and they're starting to look at colleges, and they're looking at majors, and they're taking those SATs. Man, the stress that's put on kids these days is stress that sometimes as an adult I don't even feel. So I think just having a safe place where you can talk, where you can make sense of your anxiety and your stressors is super important at that age. I work a lot with kids on self-esteem, self-identity, and just interpersonal confidence. Those are the skills that really allow us to make healthy relational choices, that help us to manage things right down to our social media. You know, how do we make that work for us? It can be a super positive thing. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. But sometimes we need a little help figuring out how to navigate it. And again, that to me, that all begins with a good foundation of who we are and how we define our place in our world. For young adults that are maybe in college for the first time, a lot of that anxiety, depression, ADHD stuff is exacerbated by being away from home, from having to make true adult decisions maybe for the first time. I work a lot with young people and really giving themselves permission to change, giving themselves permission to maybe change the major if they need to maybe change schools to either an environment or a population that better suits them. Those decisions don't seem so big once you're over that hump, but when you're in the midst of it, it can seem huge. It can feel like a failure when it turns out you don't really like what it is that you told everybody you were going to do for a living. And it turns out you don't have to have it all figured out. And to give somebody that permission and to work with them to really accept that is really powerful. I love doing that kind of work. For couples, a lot of times they decide it's time to come see me when they're empty nesters for the first time. On one hand, they're super proud that their kid or kids are in college and they're doing well, and that is a tremendous milestone. Sometimes that house is just really quiet and it's really empty, and quite frankly, it's lonely. Sometimes the space between ourselves and our partner that we've known is there. It seems really big when there's nothing really taking its place, when we don't have as many activities. Sometimes it's helpful to come in when we want to figure out, who we are, when we want to regain our joy, when we kind of remember a time when we were actually happy, but boy, seems like a long time ago. That's where therapy can really, really be effective. I work a lot with helping people overcome things that maybe they've been hanging on to for a long time. Some of us have things way back in our head and in our hearts that we have been carrying with us for our entire life. That shame, that guilt has just built, and we've found ways of masking it and hoping other people don't find out. But deep down inside, it keeps us from being authentic and having real meaningful relationships because we're just really afraid people are going to find out who we are. And some of the greatest joy that I get out of being a counselor is helping people release some of that, helping people let go of what was probably not even theirs to carry to begin with, and helping them realize that, hey, no matter how we got what we got, we don't have to carry it around. We don't have to have it with us and define us for the rest of our lives. Some of the families I see might need some help, like with blended family issues. Maybe it's mom and dad are getting remarried. Maybe it's how to navigate the two homes. Sometimes it's another family member that has perhaps a mental illness that's impacting the dynamics of the family, and a safe place to talk about these things, to learn how to really communicate our feelings and our thoughts in a calm and a very effective way is awesome. So that's kind of the gamut of people that I see. And there is a lot of times grief. Could be loss of a pet, loss of a loved one, loss of a family, just different changes that have come up. And let me tell you, grief can knock us to our knees. It can hit like a rock, and it can feel like the loneliest place on earth. And that's part of my job, is to maybe alleviate some of that loneliness and maybe provide that hope and that comfort when we can't always see it for ourselves. So as you can tell, I've been in LPC for quite some time, and believe me, I've seen a thing or two. But one of the most fascinating things that I think is so important and that I see over and over again is the need for people to tell their story, the need to be heard, to truly be seen, to be valued, and for our experiences to be honored. There's very few things that feel better than that. There's very few things that are more cathartic and more healing than being seen and feeling okay about that. I am so deeply honored, and I just wake up in awe that I get to do what I do, that I get to be invited into people's lives, and that I get to tag along for a short time on their journey. And I see the resiliency in people a lot of times before they even see it themselves. And that gives me hope, and I always pass that on. But I, again, am just very honored and humbled to do what I do for a living. And I want to wrap things up by reading a poem that you'll see on my wall when you come in. It's by a fellow therapist named Lisa Oliver, and it's called A Therapist's Job. So a therapist can't fix, heal, or change you. A therapist cannot do the work for you. A therapist cannot know you more than you know about yourself. A therapist cannot solve every issue in your life, and she can't take responsibility for your own growth. Therapists cannot determine how much you will get out of therapy, and therapists cannot force you to do anything differently. A therapist cannot always know exactly what you should do, but a therapist can guide you in healing yourself. A therapist can support you in doing the work. Therapists can create space for you to get to know yourself better. She can collaborate with you on solving parts of your life. She can work with you on taking responsibility for your growth. A therapist can support you in utilizing therapy in your own unique way. Therapists can encourage you to show up in more nourishing ways, and they can make room for you to understand what you should do. Take great care of yourself, and I really hope we can meet in person soon. Bye-bye.